tons of yeast and potentially parasites. So in some of the testings that the doctors can perform, they can perform profile testings not just on your allergy and your essential fatty acids and your vitamin mineral balances, but they can also conduct tests on your yeast as well as your parasites, or your possibility of having parasites. Now, they come with symptoms, oftentimes digestion, itchy skin, but I think eczema is one of the strongest symptoms that people tend to have a very high yeast level along with parasites. So I have personally found, as well as many of my customers, found effective doing yeast and parasite cleanses. They clean things out, or even doing whole body bowel cleanses, getting the body to detoxify, remove things, kill off the yeast, kill off the parasites, because these parasites and yeasts produce toxins, and your body can become itchy and hypersensitive to the toxins that these yeast and parasites produce. Once again, I want to iterate that oftentimes, well, the majority of time, me personally and others that I've spoken with have very little success with the corticosteroid creams and those types of things. And remember, the corticosteroids thin the skin. So if you have any eczema on your face, you never want to use it on that. I would really look to review some of this and discuss some of this with a natural health care professional. Most physicians aren't familiar with this. And then do some of your research on your own to determine maybe if some of this might help. Most of the items, or all the items I've listed here, are available at any good health food store. Next, we're going to be moving on to the fitness portion of our show. Thank you very much. Bye. Hi, welcome to the fitness portion of our show. And today I'm going to work on a movement that's going to help loosen up the hips a little bit, particularly if you sit all day long and you get kind of stiff and they get out of alignment. And what this can do is it can help strengthen a little bit of the hip flexors. It's a very basic movement, and you can grab a chair if you need to. Hopefully I'm able to maintain my balance. But what it is basically is we're just going to rotate the hip flexors around in a circular motion. And as the camera is going to show, what we're going to do is we're going to point off to the side just to get a little bit of balance. And then we just basically rotate the hip around, and then we reverse it. This is not a complicated exercise, and it feels really, really good. As a matter of fact, I'm going to reverse it because it feels so good for me. But all we're doing is we're rotating the hip flexor around, and you can put your hand on your hip. You can feel the tendon and ligaments move when you do this. If you're not able to maintain your balance, you can just do it this way. But this also, too, is an old, and it reminded me of an old ballet warm-up move that we used to do. And also, it's a balance move as well. But that'll help loosen up the hip flexors a little bit so that you're maybe not quite so stiff in that particular area. Next, we're going to be moving on to the research portion of our show. Thank you. Hi, welcome to the research portion of our show, and with us is Ralph Turchiano. Ralph?
And thank you for the intro. Many of you have asked where I post these research articles, because a lot of times people like to be able to review them after the show or see what's coming up in the next show. Well, I wrote it down the back here. You can find the research articles on vit.bz. That's www.v as in Victor, I, T as in Tom, .b as in boy, Z as in zebra. You can find them on the bottom right corner, and they're all in PDF format, and they go back about 3.5 years. Currently, there's 97 news reports I've done so far. Now to the research. All right, a new use for something for osteoarthritis. I should say new use, but a new protective measure that can be done outside of the traditional painkillers that they usually do or hip replacement. Well, they found out that fruits and vegetables that are high basically in a substance called allium, or allium vegetables, seem to have an incredibly protective effect from the enzymes that damage the joints in the case of osteoarthritis. This was published in the BMC Mucoskeletal Disorders Journal. What they discovered was this. They took 1,000 female healthy twins and followed them, had no symptoms of arthritis, and followed them for quite some time. They found that a compound in garlic, outside the ileum, called diethyl disulfate, limited the amount of cartilage-damaging enzymes when introduced into human cartilage cells. Now, they followed the twins over time to see exactly why they were not getting osteoarthritis as often as possibly somebody else. And they found out, and they located directly to the consumption of allium-type vegetables, in particular garlic. So if you have a history of osteoarthritis or something like that in the family, or you begin to come down with it, really look at basically introducing garlic into your diet. It seems to have a very positive effect. And again, published in a respected journal called the BMC Mucoskeletal Disorders Journal. Something interesting. Now back to one of my favorite supplements, beetroot juice. Not beet juice, but beetroot juice. Again, more research coming out on it, and this was published in the Journal of Applied Physiology. Real important that all your science and data is footnoted. So this way, just not someone's opinion. Well, outside of this journal, they found out that people that took beetroot juice were able to exercise up to 16% longer. And they also said, too, they looked at low-intensity exercise and found that test subjects used less oxygen while walking, effectively reducing the effort it took to walk by 12%. This is for people that have a hard time moving, difficulty on oxygen tanks or some sort of breathing respirator. They found that beetroot juice can be very helpful for that outside of just athletes. They said, when consumed, beetroot juice has two marked physiological effects. Firstly, it widens blood vessels, reducing blood pressure and allowing more blood flow. Secondly, it affects muscle tissue, reducing the amount of oxygen needed by muscles during activity. Again, beetroot juice, not just beet juice. Following on, back to exercise. One of the greatest things you could do when basically trying to reduce your risk of death from prostate cancer, if it's even a consideration, is exercise. Not just a little bit, by a lot. This came out of the advanced online edition of the Journal of Clinical Oncology. They studied 2,705 men for 18 years. And this is what they discovered, that men who did low intensity to moderate intensity workouts for about 90 minutes over an entire week, we're talking just a little less than 15 minutes a day of walking, reduced their chance of dying of prostate cancer by 41% over those that did not. 41%. Then they found out that individuals who did high intensity workouts, and they basically more during the week or maybe for an hour or so, reduced their chance of dying 61% of prostate cancer. And basically, let me back that up again. The 46% was basically dying of any cause. That was just 15 minutes of walking per day or a little less. But as far as reducing the risk of prostate cancer, vigorous exercise reduced the chance of dying by 61%. That speaks volumes. All right. Now for one supplement which hasn't really made it much in the news at all, but seems to have a real positive effect, actually the first substance to have a positive effect in regards to ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease. And of all things, spirulina. They found out that spirulina appeared to provide a neuroprotective support for dying motor neurons in mouse models, or mice that had ALS. They found out a dietary supplement which shown as spirulina delayed the onset of motor symptoms and disease progression, reducing inflammatory markers and motor neuron death in the ALA mice. Again, that was just spirulina. Sometimes they may use blue-green algae. This was reported in the Open Tissue Engineering and Regenerative Medical Journal that just came out December 21st. Now, an interesting as far as a faux pas or false step. They were associating a virus with chronic fatigue syndrome and also prostate cancer. Well, they found out they made a huge mistake. When they tried to culture viruses to find out exactly what caused chronic fatigue or prostate cancer, they accidentally contaminated with basically DNA from mice. The reason being is they try to use the DNA from mice to basically progress or speed up disease progression. Well, they found out that XMRV, the disease which they thought caused chronic fatigue, and this was basically published back in 2009 when associated with chronic fatigue, was wrong. They discovered, out of the University College of London, that XMRV was just a virus contaminant that came from mice. Had nothing to do with chronic fatigue, had nothing to do with prostate cancer. It basically was a contaminant. For a year and a half, we've been trying to fight those two diseases, looking for this virus, when all it was something which got stuck in the line of a petri dish. They said our conclusion is quite simple. XMRV is not the cause of chronic fatigue syndrome. All our evidence shows that the sequences from the virus genome in cell culture have contaminated human chronic fatigue syndrome and prostate cancer samples. It is vital to understand that we are not saying chronic fatigue syndrome does not have a virus cause. We cannot answer that yet, but we know that this virus is not causing it. And again, this is from the team at University College of London, Wellcome Trust Sanger Institute, and University of Oxford. They said, interestingly, we are using DNA-based methods to accelerate our understanding of the role of pathogens in disease, explained the professor. These will drive our understanding of infection, but we must ensure that we close the circle from identification to association and then causation, meaning they screwed up. Thank goodness they caught it. Otherwise, a lot of you would be treating for a virus or disease that has nothing to do with the ailment that you have. Now, one of my favorite articles, fluoride. The U.S. finally came out and said that we are getting too much fluoride. In a remarkable turnabout, federal health officials say many Americans are now getting too much fluoride because we're getting fluoride out of everything. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services announced plans Friday to lower the recommended levels of fluoride in drinking water for the first time in nearly 50 years based on a fresh review of science. Not new science, but finally looking at science that existed for years which the government failed to listen to, including their own scientists, which told them they were getting too much fluoride in the water. They said about 2 out of 5 adolescents have tooth streaking and spottiness because of too much fluoride. And keep in mind this 2 out of 5 you'll discover is a round down from 41%. But there is also growing worries about the more serious dangers of fluoride. The Environmental Protection Agency released 2 new reviews of research on fluoride Friday. One of the studies found that prolonged high intake of fluoride can increase the risk of brittle bones, fractures, and crippling bone abnormalities as well as cancers. And amazingly, dental and medical groups applauded the announcement. They want to lower the maximum level of fluoride in drinking water from 4 parts per million down to at least 2 parts per million, which sounds like it's a big reduction, but not really. Because still, according to the CDC, nearly 23% of children aged 12 to 15 had fluorosis in 1986 to 1987. Now it is up to 41% up to 2004. The EPA unions, including 1% of the agency scientists, pleaded with the EPA to reduce the permissible level of fluoride in water to zero, citing it can cause cancer. Britain's about one of the only countries in Europe that uses fluoridated water, and only 10% of the country does. The rest of Europe hardly does it at all. Something to look at. Well, thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much, Ralph. I appreciate it. Thank you very much for joining our show. Do your research, look things up, take care of your health. Thank you very much for joining us.